Hello, everyone. I'm Hillary Sloan, and this is Driftwood Conversations. Today we meet with Virginia Campo, born in Colombia, raised across borders, and shaped by the kind of movement that teaches you who you are. She left Colombia at 8, learned about snow days in Canada, grew up in Panama, and on a layover, found herself in the Mojave Desert, where love, timing, and a pandemic asked her to stay. In this hour, we talk about immigration and belonging, the quiet authority of intuition, and what it means to become a U.S. citizen while holding the wisdom of another homeland. We talk about falling in love in Joshua Tree and walking through the sudden loss of her father in December of 2022. Grief that led Virginia to train as an end-of-life doula. What I hear in Virginia is steadiness, gratitude as a daily practice, surrender as a teacher, and resilience that doesn't deny pain, but makes room for it to transform. She's a bridge between Latin America and the United States, between work and calling, between the living and the dying, and she is asking with a brave honesty how to use her one life well. Welcome, Virginia. So good to have you here.
Hi, Hillary. Thank you so much for having me here. It's amazing to be part of my first podcast in the high desert. So thank you for the invite. Yeah, so just to share maybe a little bit about my background and how I ended up here. I am Colombian. I was born in Colombia. I grew up very worldly, so I left Colombia when I was 8 and lived in Canada for 2.5 years. Then I was raised for most of my life so far in Panama, where I arrived when I was 12, and I left again around when I was 28. I've been very nomadic ever since until I arrived here to California on a layover and reconnected with my now husband, and I've been in the U.S. now for 5 years.
That's incredible. So, that's a whole story. And we're going to
Yes.
get into that. But before we do, I wanted to talk to you about your upbringing. You started to tell me a little bit about it, the spiritual or religious upbringing that you had, your core beliefs and what you believe has taken you through your life. Oh, and how old are you now?
I am currently 35, turning 36 in 3 months exactly. And another really cool update is tomorrow I become a U.S. citizen.
Congratulations.
Yes. And that's pretty much my upbringing, right? I've been immigrating since I'm 8 years old. So I've lived in multiple countries and I've been many places. And I think that's super, super important, or like that's a core value in my life, is that I'm so multicultural. Because I've had the fortune to live in different places, meet people from all over the world. And then in the spiritual aspect, I am Latina, so I was born and raised Catholic. I went to, a Catholic school, Catholic private school, and did my first communion, all of that. However, my parents weren't very big on going to church, but they were very spiritual. And I think that's what I would identify as, a very spiritual person. And I try to always, like, my guiding compass is my intuition. And I do believe there is something greater, there is source, there's spirit. So that's kind of what guides me, is more like my intuition, what feels right. And I believe I'm a very, high integrity, moral person just by following that belief of what's right.
Tell me more about moving from country to country, because many of us do not have that experience. And there's a whole consciousness now about anti-immigration, which I think it's amazing to get to know other cultures. But when you were a child and you were taken from one country to the other, was that difficult?
I think yes, but I think it was more difficult for my parents. So let's say, I was lucky in the sense that when you're a child, and especially the first time we moved out of Colombia, I was so young that for me it was like I'm gonna miss my friends, but it was also like a new adventure. Like I can never forget when I was in Canada and we had like snow days. Like in Colombia, there's no seasons. So all of a sudden, like you have a snow day and you can't go to school because there's, I don't know, like 4 feet of snow and you can't, the bus can't come pick you up. Like all those new experiences. Another thing that I remember at very young age was Canada is also like the US, a huge, like it's a country made of immigrants. So it's the first time I encounter people from India. And like, I'm never going to forget the Punjabi, especially. It has a very, very big presence where I lived, which was right outside of Toronto. So I had to ask my mom in a very genuine way, like, why do kids, like boys, have long hair and wear their turban? And my mom had to explain. So like, that exposure at such an early stage, I think made me so curious about cultures. I actually ended up studying international relations and politics because I was so drawn by it. But I think immigrating was always harder for my parents because the only reason why they left Colombia was because Colombia in the 90s and we left in the year 2000. But in the 90s, it was really dangerous and they wanted a better future for me and my sister. So when we moved to Canada, they were the immigrant story, right? Like my parents were both professionals, but my mom was a receptionist and my dad drove a forklift in a hangar.
Now, when you say professionals, before they got to Canada,
right.
What did they do then in your country, in Colombia?
So my dad was a chemical engineer and he worked in big factories. So he worked with like paper and cardboard. He was also a master brewer. So he worked in like the largest like brewing company in Colombia, Bavaria, which is now like owned by InBev. And then my mom studied business, and she actually studied in the U.S. Was like a very lucky, person that was able to come to the U.S. to study, and she worked in banking. And then all of a sudden, for they wanted to give me and my sister a better life, live in a country that had peace, and she was a receptionist at a law firm. And my dad drove a forklift and lifted up, boxes and all of this for me and my sister. So I think they were the ones that probably, had a harder time. And even now, as a grown-up, I got to the U.S. when I was 30. And without the intention of moving here, and that's a story we're going to get to. But even then, I consider myself a very lucky immigrant, because I was able to get a job in what I was used to doing. I've always been very well connected. I spoke almost perfect English. So I've never really, even though I've been an immigrant ever since I'm 8, I've never really had like a real immigrant story.
How interesting. I wouldn't have even thought of that, but of course, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Okay. I know your father passed away, and we'll talk about that, but did he ever get to do what he was trained to do?
Not again. He let's say he stopped working as a chemical engineer when he left Colombia, but coming to Panama. So after Canada, we moved to Panama, and how we got there is because my dad's former boss gave him a job, not in Colombia, but in Panama. And we went for it. And so he did get, let's say, to be a professional or have some sort of seniority. He managed a free zone company in the canal. So let's say he had, again, a better job, better compensation, but he was never able to go back to chemical engineering, but he was like my personal chemistry teacher and calculus and yeah, all those good stuff that me and my sister were never good at this.
Yeah, that's extraordinary. I mean, I did not have anything like that, although my grandparents, of course, were immigrants. My grandmother was a Russian peasant, and my grandfather was Polish. Now, his family were teachers, but he left Poland at 7 years old.
Wow.
To come here alone. He stowed away on ships.
Wow.
So and I don't know the whole story. We never got that story. Anyway, back to you. So why don't you tell me the story, how you met your husband? And when I met you and you told me this story, it was about timing and fate and circumstances that all fell together perfectly.
Yeah. So I was also very privileged to be able to study here in the U.S. After that, I got a fellowship.
What did you study and where?
I studied international relations, and I studied it in Florida State University. And after, I got a fellowship that brought me to San Francisco. So in San Francisco, I was based in a co-working, which back then was like, wow, right? And a startup that had a social cause, because I started my career full on social service, social cause, nonprofits. And this was great because it mixed technology with social impact. So I wanted to be in an organization that intertwined the two.
Explain the term social cost, because I haven't heard that.
Sorry, I mean impact.
Social impact.
Social impact,
okay.
Yeah. So it's actually called like a social enterprise, which is a startup with a social mission.
So is social in that term, in that context, cultural or media?
No, it means of impact, so people. So
people,
how can
culture.
we, exactly, economy. So in my case, I was working with micro entrepreneurs and giving them micro loans so they could grow their business. So it was mainly like social impact in the economy sense. So they had access to capital and they had access to employment. Entrepreneurship, let's say, because they were entrepreneurs. So anyways, I end up in San Francisco for a year and a half. And the first week I'm there, my roommate tells my now husband, oh, my roommate, she's really cute. She's Latina. And then he's like, I'm on my way. So all of a sudden, I walk into my apartment and Evan, my husband's there playing the guitar. And I'm like, who are you? And he said, oh, I'm Shane's friend. And that's how we met. We pretty much started dating immediately. But we always knew, we were also very young. We were 22. So we always knew there was an end because my program, I was only allowed to be in the U.S. for 1 year. And I got it extended. I was here like a year and 3 months. But the year and 3 months were up. And I got moved to Nairobi, Kenya, so really far away. And he's like, yeah, I can't follow you. And I was like, I wasn't expecting you to. We're very young. So we just moved on. And we stayed friends on Facebook, barely talked to each other until 2019. And this is where I mention about timing and fate. Because in 2019, I am in India doing a silent meditation retreat. Well, it's not really a retreat, it's Vipassana. And as soon as I get out, I had a crazy premonition because you're in silence and you're meditating around 12 hours a day. And I had a premonition that one of my parents or both were going to die. And it was the first time ever I think about that. I'm like, oh, my parents can die and will die. So they were the first people I called as soon as we got our phones back. And I bought a ticket to go to Panama for Christmas that year. So it was Christmas of December 2019. And I was in Asia, right? So it was a very long flight. And I was living in Asia. I was living in Bali, Indonesia. So my ticket had a layover in California. And literally, I bought the ticket, and around 20 hours later, Evan calls me on Facebook Messenger because he didn't have my number. And he goes, "Oh, I've been thinking about you because I've been thinking of people that I've met throughout my life that brought value to my life, and you're one of them. And I don't know anything about you. How are you?" So we catch up, and then he's like, "Are you coming to California anytime soon?" And I'm like, "Oh." Weirdly, I just bought a ticket to go for Christmas to see my parents, but on the way back, I have a 4-day layover, but in LA, not SF, and he lived in San Francisco. So he's like, "It doesn't matter, I'll come see you." Hillary, this was actually tomorrow, 5 years ago.
So tomorrow is what,
January 15.
15.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes, so I land in LA January 15th, 2020. In one day, I see all my LA friends that I wanted to see. And then Evan drove down from San Francisco January 16th. And very important part of the story is that it was his 30th birthday. January 17th is his 35th birthday on Friday. And I love birthdays and I love celebrating people. So I'm like, what are we going to do? And then he's like, "Oh, don't worry." And I'm like, "Have you heard of Joshua Tree?" He's like, "Yes." And I'm like, "I really want to go. It's a spiritual place. I want to go see it." And then he's like, "Great, let's go." So next thing you know, we haven't seen each other for 8 years. And we're coming to Joshua Tree to an Airbnb in Yucca Valley for 2 days to hang out. And it was magical, romantic. We went into the park. We started manifesting. So manifesting is like we were writing down what we wanted that year, right? So we were kind of doing our New Year assessment, like what do we want? And I realized that we had a lot more in common because last time we met, we were 22. And I was like, huh. And when we're driving out of the park, and you know this very well, there's no service in the park. So I get back all my messages and emails, and one of my emails is, "Your flight has been canceled. Here's your refund." And I'm like, what? So I call the airline, and they're like, "Yeah, miss, we're very sorry, but there's a virus in China right now, and we're canceling all the flights." Well, my next flight was LA, Wuhan, sorry, not Wuhan, Guangzhou, which is very close to Wuhan, where COVID started. And then from there, Bali. So they canceled my flight, and then I tried to rebook. Impossible.
And that was COVID.
That was COVID.
The start of the whole pandemic.
Yes. So COVID, and of course the universe, divine timing, brought me and Evan back together. I end up going to the Bay Area with him, and until I can find a flight. And that moment never came, because COVID started getting worse. And when I was about to fly back to Panama, and he was coming with me, because then I decided I'm going to Panama, that's where my parents are, and he was going to come with me, Panama's airport shut down. And that's the beginning of my journey here in California and in the US.
So you basically had to isolate together, am I right?
Yeah.
Talk about a good setup, right?
I know. And here's the crazy part too, Hillary, and you were asking how I ended up here, is that Evan, we were in love, right? So he's like, "I'll follow you this time." I'm like, "Okay, let's go to Panama." So he gives up his apartment in the Bay Area, and we put everything in his car, and then the airport shuts down. So we are homeless. I had a bag all along, but now Evan has everything in his car, and that's all we have. And I'm like, what are we gonna do? And then that's when he's like, "Let's go to Joshua Tree." And that's how we end up here. So we end up here getting an Airbnb, which you can probably remember. It was pretty chaotic. People were like trying to get people in their Airbnbs because the park also closed. And so we end up in an Airbnb for a month. And then we realized Joshua Tree is like a little land of opportunities. And that's how we started our life here.
Did you ever get home to see your folks?
Not for another 1.5 years.
Wow.
Yes. And that was for many reasons. One, COVID. The Panama airport closed for 1 year. And Panama had a very, very strict COVID. And they weren't allowed to go out at all. Like, it was really strict. So it was also a blessing we ended up being here, because in between everything, like, we could breathe here, there's space. So we were one of the lucky ones. And then on top of that, eventually, Evan and I got married. And I applied for my residency and my green card. And then because of that, you can't leave until you get it. So I wasn't able to leave for I wasn't able to leave for 2 years, but my parents came after 1.5 years.
Now, that brought you to another really big piece of your story, the loss of your father.
Mm-hmm.
When did that happen?
So my dad passed away December 23rd, 2022.
So one thing really just dovetailed into the next.
Yes. So actually my dad was able to come visit us here in the desert once. Then we had a brief period where we lived in Miami, and my parents were able to also come visit us there. And we went to Panama just once before he passed away because I was not able to leave the U.S. for a bit. And but my dad's passing was sudden. Yeah, he had a stroke, and it was a deadly stroke. We in Panama, my parents live in front of the hospital. So he was able to be in a coma, let's say, or end in a coma because they had to cross the street with him to get him to the hospital. And thank God for that, I was able to see him, let's say, in like the physical form before he transcended. And that is actually one of the most magical moments I've ever experienced in my life. Hardest, but also spiritual and enlightening and beautiful. But yeah, my dad went into a coma December 17th, 2022. I got there 12 hours later, and he was already unresponsive. But he pretty much waited for all of us. His brothers, some of my cousins, Evan also came to be there and gather and like celebrate him and encourage him to transcend. And then he passed on the 23rd.
Now, I read your article that you wrote about it, but tell us about that. Tell us what that meant to you, his passing.
Oh, so it's interesting because I think we all know if there's something certain in this world is that we're going to die. But we don't really think about our mortality or the mortality of the people we love. Like, that's something we try not to think about. And because of that, and believe it or not, I think Mexicans and maybe indigenous tribes of Latin America are the only ones that celebrate death in a beautiful way. But most Latin cultures don't talk about it. So you don't grow up saying when I pass, this is my will, these are my wishes, and I've prepared all of this. So my parents had never talked to me or my sister about their passing, and they also didn't really prepare for it. So next thing you know, it's not only my dad's passing was very traumatic and very sudden, but also it was the first time we had encountered death so close to us. And and I have a sister, but I'm the eldest. And I'm also very type A. I'm the one that usually, coordinates everything. So that's exactly how my role was. I just went on kind of coordination role, and I was the one, at the hospital, I was the one that had to go to the morgue and identify that was my dad, because my mom couldn't do it and nobody else could do it. So it was really hard. I had to gear up on this strength of okay, let's figure this out, and it's been now 2 years. We just had the 2-year death anniversary, and we're still dealing with a lot of admin that comes with death, apart from obviously the pain and the grief. So for 8 months after my dad passed, I tried to get busy, like as busy as I could. So I didn't have to like time to think or be alone or be sad. So I was working, and then I had consulting work afterwards. And then I realized that for the first time, I think that's also my dad's work. I was very confident growing up. So I never suffered from like imposter syndrome. I was very confident. And for the first time at work, I find myself doubting every single thing I did or said. Like I was not able to speak in meetings. And I'm like, what is going on? And I realized that I was having like an emotional burnout. And it was like, and then I started getting sick in so many ways, like gained a bunch of weight. My belly was out of control, like you name it. And I realized that it was my body saying like, you need to rest and you need to heal and you need to like face the grief. And finally, in November 2023, I quit my job and I said, okay, I'm going to do a sabbatical for as long as I can.
What was your job at that point?
I was working in a startup, in an education startup. And I led community. So it's like the users. In that case, it was like the students. So it's like an online school, let's say. They had different courses and they had 5 million students. Wow. It's pretty big. And I led all the work with those 5 million students. And so, yeah, no, it was rewarding. I loved it. My body was like having an electrical shock, like you need a break. So I take a break, 6 months, didn't open my computer, went to Bali. I also did a lot of medical checks and ended up being that I was celiac. So now I'm completely gluten-free and my health has improved massively. But then also I realized that I had this very deep fear of death and I was like, okay, so how can I address this fear of death? And I decided to take a course on and become an end-of-life doula or death doula. And what that is it's actually very more common now that people hire or get companionship from somebody that knows about end of life, if you can, right? If you can prepare for it. If it's sudden like my dad, usually the end of life doula, what they do is their work is mostly with the family. So I went on a 6-month program, super intense, to learn about end of life. And that's the physical process of it, the spiritual process of it, and the emotional. Because you need to learn how to be there for the dying person. So that's mostly the physical and also spiritual and emotional. But then once they die, for their family. So you learn a lot about grief as well.
I've just been hearing about it. It's come up a couple of times recently in books and articles. So it's interesting that you mentioned that. I didn't know that about you, but yeah. It's like, oh, well, there's something for me to look at there.
It was beautiful work. I did it. My intention was mainly for my own healing. And I think it helped so much. But I also see it as a life skill. You know, like I'm sure I'm going to go through more deaths. I'm just now like grateful to have tools and resources and training to support others. But then to also like support myself, you know, when my mom dies. You know, even a pet. We actually have a module just on pets because they play such an important role nowadays in people's lives, and like you do grieve them too.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, especially in international communities. When I was in Tanzania, they have very different ideas about pets.
Yeah, you're right.
But here, I mean, your whole life is around this amazing little creature. And when they leave, it's traumatic.
Well, because that's actually one of the definitions of grief. It's like this love that now has nowhere to go, right? And that's what a pet does for you. Like they have endless love, right? And that's what my dad also gave me and my sister and my mom. Like his love for us was so big that the pain and the emptiness that you feel is equally, if not bigger, right? So like that's why also people always say you can't cure grief, but you learn to co-live with it. And that's what we're doing.
Do you think, trying to think of the right way to say this, but that grief can be transformed into something very positive?
Yes, I think so. And I think my mom, for example, is a great example of that. My parents were married 39 years. My dad passed 5 months before their 40th anniversary. And they were they were so in love till the last day, right? And like they didn't have a lot of friends. Also, they immigrated, so their friends were in Colombia. And then after, it was just them two. Everything was them two. And us, me and my sister. Nothing else. That was their world. It was like each other, their daughters. That's it. I was very scared, for my mom's well-being. And I'm like, wow, what is she going to do? It's been like a phoenix rising from the ashes. My mom now, she helps. They had retired in the mountains outside of Panama City. And now she teaches English at the school because this is a very rural, poor area. She also, but where they retired is a retirement community. So there's actually a lot of Americans, there's a lot of Canadians, Russians, Europeans. So she even has a community called The Ones. And it's women that are either widow or divorced. And they're all above 60. And they check on each other every night at 8 p.m. They write, "Good night, I'm okay, I'm home." And every morning at 8 a.m., they write, "Good morning, I'm okay, I'm at home." And they take care of each other, So like she's used that extra time that she maybe spent with my dad to give back to the community. She's involved in church now, which funny because I just mentioned we didn't really grow up going to church, but she's found a lot of peace for her grief on that. And I just see like a new version of her.
You know what I'm reminded of right now as you've been talking of what I heard when I met you. We had a brief encounter in a group of rental people that host on vacation rentals, and you seemed perfect for Driftwood Conversations because it's about connection. It's about challenges. I mean, there isn't any one of us who are going to get through life without some very deep challenges. But somewhere we find a resilience.
Yes.
Which makes us stronger, more open. And that's what I hear from your story. Do you agree with that?
Oh, so much. Actually, yesterday, coincidentally, Hillary, I learned this in one of my classes. I was doing a grief inventory. And what that is that sometimes we think that grief is just when somebody dies. But no, grief is the emotion you feel when you have some sort of loss. And that can be the loss of a job, that can be a loss of a house. So right now we're going through a collective grief, especially us here in California, 2.5 hours away from LA, where people are hurting. And that is called collective grief. We all feel their pain. We're all trying to help. And we feel the emptiness that this is creating. But apart from that, I was doing a grief inventory because the last 5 years, since 2020, I've had compounded grief. And what that means is that I've had a lot of losses in my life. I lost my dad physically. So let's say that's the one that we usually think of when we think of a loss. I lost a pet as well. But I also had my first layoff. I also, for example, I am celiac. So I lost the ability to eat wheat. which is huge, right? It's a life change. Another is like, I also try to freeze my eggs because I do want to be a mom, but right now is not the time. But I'm 35 and, all those things. And when I try to do it, I couldn't because I had a cyst the size of my ovary in each ovary. So it's like I lost the moment I had, the cash and the time and to go through the process, and then I couldn't do it. And it's like all these little losses get compounded, and that's what is called compounded grief, which is when you experience loss several times in a small period of time. And that makes that grief and that pain and that emptiness bigger. And also potentially very harmful if you don't deal with it. So I made a post on Instagram about this yesterday where I did my grief inventory of all the things that I consider losses in the last 5 years. It was a lot of things. And I'm like, no wonder why right now I feel empty and sad, and I'm empathizing with the people of LA more than ever. And like, I've never lived in LA, but I feel for them. And so I shared about that, and somebody wrote me and they're like, you are like amazing, you're such an inspiration, because no matter like all those things you just listed, somehow you're still doing great. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't mean like I'm not sharing this to play victim or to say, look at all the crazy things that have happened to me in the last 5 years. No, I've also had a lot of amazing things happen this last 5 years. And I think the reason is because I haven't let those challenges stop me. Mm-hmm. And I've been resilient and I've been adaptive. And most importantly, I stay positive and I stay grateful. I think gratitude actually is probably a huge practice that no matter, I'm never going to forget, like when my dad passed, we all gathered around him and we prayed with gratitude. Thank you that he's not here suffering anymore, And I think that is ultimately what keeps you going and opens new doors.
This is so important. This is everything that Driftwood Conversations is about. It, with what was happening in the political arena and the division that keeps showing up. And I kept thinking, there's so many beautiful people. They don't have to agree with me. I don't have to understand them. They can be completely different. But I so enjoy hearing what they've experienced and who they are. And if I can introduce a couple of people together and have somebody meet you, like on this episode, then maybe they'll fall in love with you like I did. Not in a great, healthy way. We should fall in love with each other.
Yes.
Because ultimately, we're all going to suffer grief. We're all going to die. We all have a resilience. I do believe we do. If we can get quiet enough to find it and release victim. It's almost that simple.
Yeah.
But that's not simple at all.
Oh, no. I think that's the beauty of life, right? There is that it's not simple.
It's not simple.
Yeah.
It's uncomplicated. If you can focus on it, it becomes less complicated. But it's not simple to go through. It takes a lot. What would you tell somebody at any age going through some hard times?
Yeah, I think it's like maybe instead of doing an inventory of your grief, although that's always positive too, do an inventory of your blessings. Because even in very, very hard times, and like I said, I think this last 5 years, and I'm 35, I don't know if I'm midlife, but I'm getting there. Maybe more, maybe less, right? We don't know. But I've had, this last 5 years have been the most challenging in my life, but also the the most wonderful, right? Because I had to go inwards, I had to learn, I had to integrate, I had to grow from all of this. And so I would say, try to go inward and look at all the blessings you've had and tune into those and like manifest them, claim them, say, I am healthy again. I enjoy of a healthy physical body, mind, and spirit. And I think like once you make those claims and affirmations and you hold on to those blessings with gratitude, you call them again. Every time I've gone through a hard time and I realize that it's because I'm hanging on to something as well. And going back to a little bit to spirituality and what you believe. And every time I've been in a tough situation where you have no other choice but to let go. And going back to my dad passing, the first 24 hours I was in Panama, all me and my sister and my mom said was praying to God that he would survive. And my mom said, if he's, a vegetable, he can't move, he can't eat, it's okay. I'll sacrifice the rest of my life to take care of him. She was willing to do that. And me and my sister, yes, we want him. We want his physical body. We just want him here. He's too young. Like my sister's still not married. He was never a grandpa. Like all these things that you hang on to. And the doctor was like, there's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do. And that was just like, we couldn't process it. But it wasn't until like we realized that he wasn't coming back and we had to release. And the last one to release was my sister. And this was when I said the 7 days of coma were very magical, was because a great friend of mine, my therapist, who's also a mentor, friend, like a second mom, came to the hospital. And she's like, how are you? She came to support us. And I said, we're just worried because my sister's the only one that hasn't been able to let go. And she's like, we were talking about this. My sister walked in. And then she says, do you want to go in and talk to your dad? I might get emotional sharing this because it was just incredible. So she goes in with my sister to the ER room where my dad is. And then she did a meditation and she told my sister to let him go, and to say bye to him. And my sister, who's not as spiritual as I am, we all are, of course, but let's say she hasn't done ayahuasca and vipassana and all the things I've done. She says she saw my dad literally going upstairs already with wings and looking back and waving. And I truly believe she saw that, And that moment she let go and he passed away 12 hours later. And I think that's like the one of the biggest lessons he left us with is that timing is divine and is perfect. And sometimes we don't understand it. But like when you let go is when other beautiful things open up.
It does. And so important right now.
Yeah.
Look what's happening. LA, but the South with the hurricanes and all over, we're being asked to just let go, let go, let go.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling you agree with this, that even if we're not actively teaching it, by incorporating that surrender into our lives, we're touching other people. It's a collective.
Yes, it is. And that's like, look at what's happening, right? It's like in times of crisis is when we unite. Like, maybe not everyone, and that's why it's so hard right now, because we're still observing so much division, especially in this country. Like, really pains me, right? Because this is where I live. I said I'm becoming a citizen tomorrow. And I'm seeing that almost as I'm being tasked to be active on trying to unite this country more and the people. But I think LA has been a very recent proof that we can empathize and we can come together and we can like help others.
Absolutely. I'm convinced of it. Has your understanding of grief reshaped how you approach work, what you're doing now for income, for your future?
Yeah, I'm still like, it's interesting. I think last year was all about my personal healing. That was my focus. And this year, my focus is on finding my calling. And because even though I've been super fortunate to always had incredible jobs, always loved what I've done. I've been very lucky to never been in a work that I'm like, ugh, can't wait for it to be 5, or I don't like, or I don't connect with the mission or what we're doing. That has never been the case for me. However, I do feel still that I am not fulfilling my calling, if that makes sense. And I don't know if my calling is connected to my work and what I do for money to survive. But I know I want to spend this year trying to tap into that calling and figuring out what it is. And the reason I think why it's more pressing now than ever is, again, because I feel like I got a shock of life is finite, it ends. And I have hopefully another 30 years of work years, and I want to use them well.
Well, hopefully more than that.
Well, don't you retire at 65?
Me? No.
But like in legally, what is the retirement age now?
Oh, there isn't really a legal age. Social Security comes in at 65, yes. But I'm 75.
Look at you. Well, that's what I like. But look how much you've transformed, right? Like, and this is like your calling. You felt called to do this podcast.
I feel totally called.
So I just want to feel that way every day with whatever I'm doing.
I think patience, not putting pressure on myself, and relaxing. Last year, right around Christmas, my back went out. I was in bed for 4 months, 2024. Wow. And I understood surrender. I've understood surrender in a lot of different ways. And I said to myself, fine, okay, I surrender, because I cannot do anything. I'm flat here. There wasn't even a way I could turn to make the pain less. It would just, that was it. And the minute I had an operation, it was a herniated disc. And when I had an operation, it was a half hour and I was fine. And that intensity of pain to no pain was so eye-opening. You know, it was like, oh my God, I'm not sure that I ever experienced life without pain. Whether it was a stomach ache or a backache or a neck ache or working too hard or headache or something, the stress and the pressure. And all of a sudden, the transformation was so immediate that I got a big lesson. And in that, I knew I wanted to give back with whatever appeared that I could do. So the writing and the journalism and the photography and the voice, all of that came up and it was fine, start. Before that, I was looking for ways to make money, and that did not work for me.
Incredible.
Because it wasn't the right focus. It wasn't, I do believe there's ways to make money and support yourself. In fact, we have to. We have to take care of ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, and that's almost the most important, because you have to ground the spiritual in the physical body. So you have to be physically present. Take care of the physicality, take care of the monetary needs, take care of everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like, some people define life as our souls having a physical experience. And therefore, we can't forget about that part of the job. Pay taxes.
Absolutely.
Stop on a stoplight. I don't know. Like, that's the physical things we have to do.
Yeah.
But then what's the soul calling that we also have to do in this world?
Right. And the balance.
Yeah.
The balance of the two.
Yeah.
And that kind of takes me to the next question was, you've had very different worlds, high growth startups, social impact. What have you learned about building meaningful connections in your world, within communities, and in your personal life?
Yeah. Well, kind of going back to what I said, that I feel like I've been a lucky immigrant my whole life. The reason why I say that is because of my networks and the communities I've been able to be part of, and my parents. So I say my parents are my personal cheerleaders. They never ever said no to me, which also has its harm because rejection hits really hard. But because of that, I've been able to always, have a lot of confidence. And I grew up always being part of some sort of community or group. So I was in debate club, I was in theater. When I was in university, I applied to scholarships. I studied abroad. I met a bunch of people studying abroad. And so I was always part of programs that are selective, and therefore always with people that if I had not applied, stayed still, conformed, I would have never met. And honestly, till today, and again, is a double-edged sword. A lot of the opportunities I've had in life, personal and professional, have been through contacts and connections and people that introduced me, opened the door, let me know of something, which can also be really hard because, for example, I applied for 5 jobs, Hillary, in November. I got rejected from 3. And I was like devastated. This is not for me. I cannot go through a normal process of application. I need an intro. Which is true. It helps when applying for jobs and trying to look for something new. But I am a huge believer in the power of community, in the power of networks, and in yourself also playing an important role in other people's lives.
What are your current plans? And I know they can change, and they will. And also, I've got to say, it's remarkable where you are at your age.
Thank you.
It's great. It's really great. And that's something that I don't know that anybody can give you or you can build. I think that's the resilience you have from your soul.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think, again, I do credit this a lot to my upbringing from like my parents, how they raised me, right? It was, they never said no to me. They never punished me, but they also like made me from a very young age understand the consequences of my decisions. They're like, you decide. If you do this, this is the consequence. If you do this, this is the consequence. But you decide. So that empowerment, I think, has also helped a lot with who I became. But on what's next, a couple of things. Like I said, I decided this year is my year where I'm going to be way more intentional about finding my calling. And so far, my calling is to continue to be an entrepreneur on my own. So back to, I applied for 5 jobs in November. I said, this is not for me. And then I'm like, what can I do on my own? So I'm starting a company. I'm going to do HR consulting, which is what I do professionally. And I've already been doing. But I'm going to be more intentional. I'm going to be more organized. So, I'm setting up my LLC and all those worldly things you have to do in this physical world. But I do hope that with my HR practice, I'm able to help startups and businesses improve the way they they build companies around people. And then, so that's, let's say that's what I'm thinking for business. I also, becoming now an American citizen tomorrow, fingers crossed, I realized that I am a bridge. I'm a bridge between Latin America and the US. And I want to embrace that a lot more in whatever capacity that is. So I'm not 100% sure on how that's going to look like, but I realized that I'm like, wow, I am this bridge in between where I'm from and where I was born and raised, and then this other country that is where I live now, probably will continue to live in, and that has a lot of opportunities. How can I, use these opportunities to help my region and also bring value from there here? So that's something else that's been on my mind. And then last, and I'm so grateful that a lot of your questions were around this topic. Ever since I became a death doula, one of my purposes is to talk about death, because we don't talk about death enough. So being in podcasts like this, talking, writing more about it is another thing that I definitely want to be doing more. Sharing my story, being more vocal. Like you have the power of voice, and that's why this is your calling, and it's so clear that it is. I want to make sure I also, have more opportunities to share my story and to speak about these lessons, about death, about preparing for it as well.
Do you have ideas where you'll go, or are you just going to be open to opportunities?
Open to opportunities, just like, we met three weeks ago.
Yes.
And we talked about this. So actually another friend who's American but lives in South Africa invited me to do a death workshop. So, things start trickling in, and we'll see, we'll see what this could end up in.
That's the magic of the universe.
Yes.
It's so hard to surrender, but when you do, and you can't do it with any premeditated idea of what's going to happen. You have to go through all the feelings, and then you let go, and then things happen. They just magically appear. Don't you agree?
100%. Yep.
And that's when I think all of the limitations we have, which can be very helpful because it can actually focus you.
Yeah, let's see, that's the plan. But like you said, I'm also trying to let the universe do its magic as well, and whatever I'm called to do, I'll just say yes. That's another important one. Yes to opportunities.
That's a very important one. That's great.
Yeah.
Wow. So, thank you. Is there anything else you want to say to wrap up? And
maybe along with that, I always, at the beginning of the year, do two things. I manifest what I want to do, or what I want to achieve this new year. But I also do a vision board. And this is a concept that's more popular in people. Usually, you cut out things from magazines or you print things and you put it on a vision board. But I actually got the chance to do a vision board workshop this year that was completely different. And I was so surprised by it. And first we had to draw everything. And I was like, oh no, I don't know how to draw this. But it was wonderful because you had to put spirit at the center of your vision board, however that looked like. So mine was like a heart with wings and light. That was my spirit symbol. And then this was the most magical part. The most magical part was we had to draw a square or rectangle, around spirit. And then everything we wanted in the vision board was inside the rectangle. And outside the rectangle, which ended up being like an inch margin of the page, was the universe, and was us opening and acknowledging that sometimes we want something, but the universe might want something else, and to have that open mind to invite that to also come in. And I think that's exactly what we just said. How do you do that? By saying yes, but also by surrendering. An example is, for example, inside my vision board, I put, I really want a Bronco of this year for a new car. And I'm giving a very material example, obviously. Opening it up to the universe is like, for example, if that's not the car I'm meant to have, and then all of a sudden in a raffle, I win a Tesla, then I'm obviously open to that, right? So it's like saying yes to the universe, saying yes to opportunities, and acknowledging that we cannot get attached to what we want because there might be another plan for us. And I think that's a good last message, because that's something that I did the first week of this year, was that vision board. And I was like, wow, I think it's something that I've practiced, but I had never physically seen it in a board, what we control versus what we don't.
So one last question that I've been asking most people here. If you were to meet yourself right now, would you hang out with yourself?
I think so. No, I'm very proud of who I've become and who I am. And I think that I see that who I'm becoming as an adult is a perfect in between my mom and my dad, and their best selves, and that's like my way to honor my dad as well. And I think that if I was to meet myself, I would see that, and appreciate that. I try to be authentic and loving and caring, and of course I'm not perfect, but I think I'm likable. I would like to hang out with myself.
You have a great attitude. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hillary.
Yeah.
And I love what you're doing.
Thank you. That was my conversation with Virginia Campo. Her story carries so many layers: immigration and belonging, love and timing, grief and surrender. What stays with me is her insistence on gratitude, even in loss, and her reminder the resilience isn't about pushing past pain, but allowing it to remake us. Thank you for listening to Driftwood Conversations. If Virginia's story touched you, I hope you'll share this episode with somebody who could use a reminder of the beauty and the courage in all of our lives. Until next time, may we keep listening for the quiet wisdom that carries us forward.